Okay, welcome. There are some chairs on the left there, Jared. Okay, let's start. Yesterday we totally forgot to pray the whole time, so let's start with prayer, and then we'll go right into the Q&A. For those who are new to this, I'll explain that in a minute. Let's start. Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to talk and discuss rationally and logically about the things that you have created, Lord, and the laws that you have created. We pray now that you will bless us, give us wisdom, give us understanding, and give us opportunity to use this gently with non-Christians and with the rest of our communities, Lord. We pray that you will bring your presence here in all the discussions and that you will bless us greatly. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Okay, so if you haven't been here before, we start with a Q&A, with questions and answer discussion time, which is the opposite of what most people do. Most times you have a teaching time and then a discussion time. And the reason I don't do it that way, because if you have a teaching time and a discussion time, then the discussion time is just repeating what the teacher said. So why did you have the discussion time if you're just going to say what he said? Oh, well, to reemphasize. No, so this way, what I want you to do is, I want you to wrestle with the issues up front, and then we'll go into the teaching time. So by that time, you'll be like, oh, yeah, this is an issue. So with that, having said that, let's take, if you're watching, the slide should show you the discussion time. So we'll go over the questions, and we'll take about 20 minutes and see where we are. Great. Have fun. Okay, let us begin. Robin, can you see if the Zoom guys can hear? They should be hearing it on the live stream, not on the Zoom. They may want to disconnect the Zoom. We may want to just turn off the sharing because then they may get two audios. Yeah. Oh, the screen share on the Zoom. Yeah, so folks, we're going to turn off the screen share on the Zoom, so you'll have to go to the live stream. Maybe you should type that in there. Okay, let's start with a question. What was the prophet's role in the Bible? What do you guys think? Yeah. Yes. To prophesy God's word, to confront sin. How much of the Bible actually prophesied the future? How many of the prophets prophesied the future versus prophesying what would happen if they did not obey God's laws? How many prophets actually prophesied the future? Like Isaiah, child will be born, all that stuff. Versus prophesy what would happen if God's laws were not obeyed. Yeah. Mostly the latter, right? In fact, most of the prophet's role was very seldom to prophesy the future, more often to warn the people what would fall upon them if they disobeyed God, if they appointed or followed leaders who went against God's laws, to call out the people to God's law, and to point out the political leaders who are abandoning God's law and chastise them publicly when they oppress innocents. Remember? All the guys, what did Elisha and Elijah do? They were attacking Ahab and saying, look, you're an evil man. Look, this is what's going to happen. Look, this is how God is going to punish you. Unlike Jonah, the prophets were not always welcomed or popular. Most prophets were well hated, right? Jeremiah was thrown in a well. I mean, and it was only one guy who went and saved him from the well. He was supposed to be in there. Well, why did they throw him in the well? Because he said, look, Israel and I think Judea were going to be attacked and taken over. And shortly after, they were attacked and taken over. And the reason he said that is because you have disobeyed God's laws. And so in the same way, we should remember that we need to be prophets in this common modern age. And we're not going to be popular all the time. That doesn't mean we should strive to be unpopular, right? But it does mean that there are many times when we will not be popular. So I have a motto. Today we're going to talk about the logical case against abortion. It says part one. We're doing part one and part two because otherwise I'd have to fly back in next month again for part two. But But the motto I have is don't let the consequences of your logic force you to abandon that logic. And I came upon this after arguing with many atheists. And I would argue about God existing, and at the end they says, well, I can't refute your, they wouldn't say this in practical terms, but essentially they would say, I can't refute your argument, but I don't like the consequences of it, so I'm not going to believe in God. Right? And one guy pretty much said this. So it was a guy who helped me edit, a great guy. He was in my cubicle next to me at work. And I wrote my book, Agent X. Who's Agent X? You might have heard me say this earlier. And I wrote the book, and at the end of the book, when I was done with the book, I gave it to him to read. And because he was very interested in things like that. And he read the whole thing, and he marked it all up, and he gave it back to me, and I put his edits into the book, and then I sent it back to him, and he said, well, that's not what I said. This is what I think would be better. This is the better argument. It was great. He really helped me edit the book. And at the end, I said, can I attribute the editing to you? Can I give you the, some of the credit? And he said, no, thank you. And then I said, well, what do you think of the arguments? Because you've shown me where all the arguments are strong and weak, and I've corrected all the weaknesses. And he said, well, because in my book, I actually show there are two options. Either you have to believe that God exists, or you have to believe that infinite universes exist. And the problem with infinite universes, that means that there are infinite copies of you and me all over the world. And that is really absurd. Because if there are infinite copies of you and me, then every single possible scenario has taken place. In fact, every single alternative scenario has taken place too. So the idea that, okay, there are infinite me's and you's somewhere out there giving the same talk in infinite other universes. And in some places, you're the one giving the talk to me. Because that's how that universe has developed or evolved, right? And it's really an absurd concept. Because let's say you're playing poker and I get 10 royal flushes in a row. And I'm winning every time. And you go, that's impossible. Nobody can win every time with 10 royal flushes, which is a good hand in poker. Apparently, I don't play poker. And you say, there's no way anybody can win 10 royal flushes in a row. You must be cheating. And I say, no, I'm not cheating. We're just in that one universe where I always get 10 royal flushes in a row. Would you believe me? Or would you say, no, you're dirty, thinking, lying, cheat, give me my money back, right? And so it's an absurd conclusion. And he helped me edit that part in the book as well. And I said, so what do you think? He says, I'd prefer to believe in infinite universes. I prefer to believe in infinite universes rather than believe in God. The consequences of his logic were so overwhelming that he decided that he would rather believe in the absurdity than follow the logic. So he abandons the logic for it. Great guy. But definitely had a issue. So in this talk, as we go through, and some of you may, I don't know where you guys all stand on this issue, but as we go through, if you go, yes, you're right, yes, you're right, yes, you're right, but I don't like the consequence of that logic, and so I'm going to still stay pro-choice. Right? Okay, the second motto that we have is focus or perish. There are so many times when I get into discussions where people will take me off. They will want to go off on another path. And this is something you should always do. When you get in a discussion with someone and they come up with a good point that's not relevant, and if I'm doing it in person, I will say, that's a great point. I am going to write it down, and we'll come back to it later. Because they want to know that you've heard them. But at the same time, if you go down that rabbit trail, you will never come back to proving your point. So focus on the point. They might say, this answer, that's a great point. Let me write it down. We will address it later. And in many of these, you will see people try to go off on the rabbit trail. What about women's rights? What about dying women? What about this? Well, we'll get to that. Let's first focus, right? Okay. Now, I want to be very clear that as we had in the discussion, none of these are salvation issues. You can be a pro-choice Christian. I think you're misguided. I think you're wrong. And I think, as one of the commenters on Zoom said, if after you are a mature Christian, you're still pro-choice, then you may want to question whether you're saved or not. That's a valid thing. But I don't think it's a salvation issue. Okay? Because people can be wrong and still be saved. Because what is the salvation issue is, do you believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? That's the salvation issue. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and God? Okay? Secondly, this is important because we have a responsibility to individuals, right? And secondly, I want to say that if you've had an abortion, we're not here to condemn you. We're all sinners in need of grace, okay? Nobody's here to condemn you. It is not our place to condemn you. We think it's wrong. That does not mean you're an evil person. right? Now, if after this, you understood everything, you accepted everything, but then you still let the consequence of your logic make your decision, then you need to investigate. You need to look at yourself and evaluate your stance. Okay? So abortion is not the unpardonable sin. God still loves you. We still love you. We're all just as guilty as you all. None of us are better than you. We all have our weaknesses. Rebelling against God is what separates us from God. Not having an abortion, not lying, not cheating, and apparently not even killing, right? Look at all the murders in the Bible who are saved, right? So rebelling against God is what breaks that. Okay. So here's what that leads to. Never make abortion a Christian versus a non-Christian issue. Whenever you talk about abortion, you don't want to make it a Christian issue. Why? Because this is not a Christian versus non-Christian issue. There are thousands and thousands of pro-life non-Christian organizations. Here's just a few of them. Pro-life atheists. Yeah, you know who Christopher Hitchens is? He was one of the greatest, vehement, angriest atheists I've ever seen or heard, right? And I never met him personally, but I listened to his debates. I was at debates where he was there in person. Really adamant atheist, right? Hates God, right? In fact, Frank Turek, who's a good friend of mine, said, Frank Turek has debated him 2 or 3 times, and he said, let me summarize Christopher Hitchens' argument every time. Here's how it is. There is no God, and I hate him. Right? So that's Christopher Hitchens, yes. Exactly. Well, that's the issue, right? That's the funny thing, right? But Christopher Hitchens is pro-life. Here's the hardcore atheist that we've known for a long time, and this guy is pro-life. Right? And that's the funniest thing, because I get on these atheist boards and they're like something, and they get in the big argument like, so are you saying Christopher Hitchens was wrong? Right? Now, of course, they say, of course he was wrong, you know, but they don't want to give. Okay, so lots of pro-life gays and lesbians, pro-life Buddhists. I am part of this Facebook.com secular pro-life, which is the secular pro-life group. It's kind of a funny group because occasionally the person who runs it is an atheist and will occasionally put atheist things and everything will beat them up saying, look, stick to the issue. It's not about atheism, this is about pro-life, right? So it's kind of a funny group. But it's a good group. There's lots of good stuff there, good arguments there. Okay, so never make abortion a Christian versus non-Christian issue. It isn't. The only Christian versus non-Christian issue is if they have accepted Jesus Christ. Right? People don't need to be pro-life to be saved. I want you to be saved even if you're not pro-life. Right? I want you to accept Jesus Christ. In fact, if I know that you are open to the message of the gospel, I am not going to talk about I'm not going to talk about pro-life or pro-choice to you. I want to focus on getting you the gospel, right? So I want to focus on that. Now, if I think, well, this is not going anywhere, then I might default to having fun and having arguments and discussions with you, right? So, and then if you are talking to someone, always make sure that you are cautious and make sure that they know they may have had an abortion, right? And make sure they know that in this discussion, you are not here to condemn them. You want to have an intellectual discussion. If it results, and I gave this presentation that I'm about to give you to junior high kids about, must be like 15 years ago. And I'm trying to remember if I talk. I'll come back to it later. Hopefully, I'll remember to come back to it. But I had a very interesting incident doing that. But what's important to them is that it was important. It was very important that I had led with this, and I told people to deal compassionately with people who may have had an abortion, and to make sure that they understood what we've all made. So if you get into the discussion, have that disclaimer for it. It's very important. Okay. Okay, so today we're going to talk about 3 things. We have an agenda. Why we need to know about abortion, facts about abortion, and how to diffuse 5 potential emotional bombs ahead of time. And then we're going to talk to how to reduce the argument to a single issue, how to prove the fetus is either human or something we don't know, and then what we can do about it. And we're going to go really fast because this is a longer presentation. Now, some Christians will come up to you and say, we should be worried about saving people, not talking about abortion. Okay, I actually agree that we should be worried about saving people, but I don't believe that we should not be talking about abortion. The truth of the matter is we should be doing both, right? Imagine if someone had used the same argument with Jews. Well, we really need to start converting the Germans and Nazis and not worry so much about saving the Jews from the death camps. right? I just think, oh, how about this? Oh, we really need to worry about saving the slave owners and not worry about freeing the slaves, right? It's the same argument. You can't use it that way. It doesn't work. It's illogical, right? So you always want to give them both if you can. Focus on saving, yes. If you can't, then you can then default to this. Okay, let's talk about what you need to know about abortion. First of all, we are responsible for the moral society we leave to our children. So whatever we leave to our kids will be the society that they have to deal with. And if we deal with a society that's focused on death, they will have to live through that. Secondly, the rules are there to protect us, not because God is a cosmic killjoy. And we did this yesterday when we talked about it. We said, look, why are the rules there? The rules are there to protect us, not protect God. God isn't there going, oh my goodness, you did this or you did that. It's not there to protect him, right? And then the next thing is the slippery slope is real. A lot of people will say there is no slippery slope. The slippery slope argument says if people do this, and they will do this, and they'll do this, and then we'll end up killing each other, right? Now, there are some bad slippery slope arguments, and there are some good slippery slope arguments. So if somebody says the slippery slope does not exist, no, that's not true. There are some bad slippery slope arguments, but there are also some really good ones. Okay, so let's look at the slippery slope argument to start. When abortion was first legalized, many Christians said that this was the first step to a society that not only killed unborn babies, but they would then start killing old people and the mentally ill, and at some point would return to the days of Rome where unwanted children were killed. This is literally what people said in the 1970s, and everybody laughed at them. They said, you're crazy, that's not going to happen. In fact, their argument was, with abortion, there will be less unwanted kids, less needy kids, less poor kids. Society will be better off. Every child, a wanted child, was the saying. But since then, Planned Parenthood has been keeping aborted babies alive to harvest their organs. In fact, this professor, supports euthanizing disabled children because their parents are harmed seeing their children suffer. Right? Some people get turned off when we compare anyone to Nazi Germany and the Nazis. But in this crowd, I'm sure we're intelligent enough to recognize the subtleties. In Nazi Germany, they first started by eliminating the weak and then the mentally ill. And they did this slowly and gradually. And they ended up by eliminating anyone they didn't like or anyone they thought wasn't worthy of life. And their famous saying was, life that's not worth living. So if you were mentally ill, if you were a Down syndrome child, they didn't call it Down syndrome back then, but if you had some sort of deficiency, then it was a life not worth living. And I asked myself, anybody ever watched Schindler's List? It's a horrific movie, but it's worth watching if you're old enough, but it will haunt you for days. I watched Schindler's List and I visited some of the Holocaust displays in London, and I asked myself, how could a Christian nation do this to other human beings? And the only answer I could get was this. They had to be convinced that the Jews were actually not humans. I mean, otherwise, how could this is the land of the Reformation. This is the land of Martin Luther. This is the land where all of us Protestants claim as, in a sense, where we were founded, right? And how did these Protestant Christians get to the point where they thought Jews were not human? Well, what was Hitler's first step? First, he said that the Jews were evil. He blamed the economic problems on them. He blamed them. He said they were the capitalists that were hurting the country. And then they determined the Jews were inconvenient. And then they determined the Jews were not fully human. And then they determined that eliminating the Jews was okay because they were not fully human. Right? Unless we feel that we are better than them, in 1857, the Supreme Court ruled that Dred Scott was not a full human being. Right? And so he had no rights. Because why? Because it was inconvenient for the slaves to have full rights. And let's not forget, even though they were a dwindling minority for years, the KKK don't think I'm fully human. Right? Now, why do I say they were a dwindling minority? Because when BLM came on the scene, when Black Lives Matter came on the scene, the KKK and all the white supremacists used that to what? Recruit more people. I remember looking through it, and the FBI said, if you look at the records of the FBI before 2014, there were only 500 known white supremacists in the entire United States, according to the FBI. After 2014, when BLM came on the scene, and after it grows, you see that number growing and growing and growing. Why? Because the person who created BLM was a Marxist, and the people and the KKK are socialists and Marxists. They're both two different ilks, and they're being manipulated by the same people. Okay. So, and by the way, what was the most literate nation in the world in 1939? Nazi Germany. Everybody there could read or write. The literacy is not really going to give you morality. Okay, so let's go through this. What did the Nazis say? Well, the Nazis says that the Jews were a parasite. Hitler called them a parasite. Dr. August Hirt said they were repulsive yet characteristic of subhumanity, a kind of trash. The Reichsgericht, which is their Supreme Court, itself refused to recognize Jews as a person in the legal sense. Now, they started using words about Jews to rephrase them as non-humans. And we see the verbiage, the language started changing with abortion. So Hitler changed the language. Planned Parenthood and the pro-choicers started changing the language about babies. Instead of calling baby or embryo, they said it's a product of conception. Fallopian cell matter, collection of cells, fertilized ovum, unwanted tissue. They say terminate the pregnancy instead of what? Kill the baby. Now, time has passed enough that now they are okay killing babies, but it's a slippery slope, right? And so the American today was the Jew was the unborn, was a parasite. In the book, Our Bodies, Our Mind, Made for Women, it calls the unborn a parasite. And they call them subhuman and relatively closer to a piece of tissue by Dr. Amital Alzioni. And they also, in that book, they call it so much garbage. The word person as used in the 14th Amendment does not include the unborn, according to the Supreme Court Roe v. Wade decision. And the slippery slope? Well, what's going to happen tomorrow? The old, the poor, the mentally disabled, the Christian, 2-year-old children. I wrote this presentation in 2003 or something like that. And at that time, there was a guy named Peter Singer. Peter Singer, Princeton DeCamp professor at the Center for Human Values, touted for his eminence in the field of bioethics. What does he say? Infanticide is not necessarily more morally important than abortion, which is morally negligible. In fact, some infanticide is not even as important as, say, killing a happy cat. Killing an infant is never killing a person and is morally permissible, at least in 2 kinds of situations. And one of those situations was because you don't want the child. The other situation was, if I'm not mistaken, was because the child was not fully going to grow up to be fully intelligent, was mentally deficient. And then, of course, Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, says this. Protect women's health, not if you're a baby girl. The most merciful thing that a family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. And then my co-founder of EBLM, Every Black Life Matters, has written a book called Woked Up. And she talks about this whole plan of Margaret Sanger and Darwin about how it ended up making the blacks as the race that needs to be destroyed. And here's what Margaret Sanger said about blacks. She says, we should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach for the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Now, I've shown this to some pro-choicers, and they say, well, she's just saying they don't want it to come out, that they don't want that to be the view of people. But then why does she call about the more rebellious members? Obviously, those rebellious members are fighting the idea because they know it's right, and so she wants to quiet the rebellious members. The very fact that she says that shows that that is her intention. Now, how about the killing of the old? We talked about the killing of the babies at the slippery slope. Here's the Netherlands back in the 1990s. And I just haven't had a chance to update these statistics. When the unwanted unborn had no value, the next thing is the unwanted old and ill had no value. And so this is the Dutch government surveys from the 1990s and 1995. Euthanasia 2.4% of all deaths were euthanized. That's 3,000 deaths. In 1995, it had dropped to 1.8%. So you think that's that's assisted suicide. Now, assisted suicide, so that's euthanasia, where they actually kill. Assisted suicide, where they help someone die, stays about common. But then here's what's very important. Without the patient's request. What does that mean? If somebody does not request to be euthanized, what does it mean? It means they murdered them. Now, I don't believe in euthanasia. I disagree with euthanasia. I disagree with assisted suicide. But this has nothing to do with that. That means they murdered 1,031. Now, the good news is 5 years later, they had murdered less people. And then this is the withdrawal of treatment to hasten death is 8.7%, and it grew to 13.3%. What does that mean? That means that rather than help the patient, they decide to withdraw treatment. And when you have socialized medicine, like in the Netherlands, that is usually your only source of treatment. Now, if you add that all up, you end up with something like 13, 14, 15, almost 16% of all deaths in the Netherlands was somebody killing somebody else. You want to know if the slippery slope is true. As a result of this, Michael Howitt Wilson of the Alert Campaign Against Euthanasia says a lot of people in Holland are frightened to go into the hospital because of the situation. Because 18% of them never come back out again. Imagine this, you're a doctor, you have a patient who's really ill, but no money to pay for their treatment. Why not kill them? Save everybody a hassle because the state has to pay for it. I did a talk at the VAC. By the way, come to the VAC tomorrow. And which reminds me, there's a whole bunch of newspapers out there, Robin, if you could just hand them out. For those who don't already have them. Some of you might already have them. So we have Curtis Bowers tomorrow at 6 o'clock. It's free at Calvary Chapel. You want to come listen to him. Curtis Bowers is going to tell you all about the First World War, the Second World War, and the Vietnam War, and what really happened behind the scenes. You don't know the truth. So I think it's very important that you guys be there. That'll be a fascinating presentation. Curtis is a great speaker. But I want you to understand this, right? You have no money to pay for your treatment. The treatment is going to cost you money. Why would the doctor want to save your life? He gets paid whether you live or die. And then, see that number? That number is not a real number because Henk Johansson of the Lindeboom Institute says that the reality is the clear majority of cases of euthanasia, both with and without request, go unreported and unchecked. We are responsible for the moral society we leave to our children. Oh, I was going to go off and I said anytime the talk I gave a few months ago at the VAC was anytime you see government money, you're going to see bad things happening. Right? For instance, Child Protective Services gets $4,000 per child in Child Protective Services. California gets $8 billion from the federal government. Do you think they have any desire to give up any of those kids? Now, what's worse is, in any given situation, they lose 20 to 30,000 kids. How can you lose 20 to 30,000 kids in the system? Don't they have paperwork? Don't they have computers? The IRS can find you anywhere you go. We are responsible for the moral society, for the slope we leave for our kids. So the point I was trying to make is anytime there's government money, there's good reason. COVID, a great example with COVID. I was talking to, and I may have mentioned this, I say it in the talk, I was talking to a union guy. He was with the first responders, and they were 30% of the San Jose City staff, firemen and EMT types, were all going to be fired. Why? Because they refused to take the vaccine. And I said, well, that makes no sense. Why would a department head want to lose 30%? They're already stretched to the limit. Why would you want to lose 30% of your staff? He says, well, even if they take no vaccine. He says, well, first of all, I said, why don't you want to take the vaccine? He says, because we learned that we would go to these calls and we'd find these young, healthy people dying of a heart attack, and they'd just taken the vaccine. So we said, there must be some connection. We're not getting the vaccine, and now we're going to be fired. And I said, well, why would they want to fire you? He says, you don't understand, Neil. I said, well, if you lose 30% of your department, aren't you going to get shrink, and then you're going to get less jobs, less money from the government? He goes, no. It's a PPP Cares. See, PPP Cares is a fund that the government said, if you meet 100% of vaccine requirements, you get something like, I don't know, it was something like tens of millions of dollars of government funding. And he says that was the whole incentive of firing people. I said, well, but they know people are dying. He goes, they don't care. So, government money. Okay, so let's get into the facts about abortion. How many abortions happen every year in America? My stats are from 2018. In 1990, we had 1.4 million abortions in America. That's about 3,900 a day. And by 2018, that had dropped to 0.862 million, which is 2,400 a day, right? And I think it's dropped a bit more. Let's go look at abortions by gestation age. Abortion by gestation age, week 6, most abortions are done before week 6, and then by week 7, week 8, they start to drop down. And by week 21, which is what is known as the third trimester, it drops down to about 1.4 abortions. Okay, let's go over the life cycle of the baby briefly. Okay, so by one point, at this point, only 18,200 abortions happen after the 22nd week. Right, so most abortions happen in this period. Okay, 2 weeks. At 2 weeks, the cell starts to split. This is about the time when at 4 weeks, the heart starts to beat. This is about the time when most women figure out that they're pregnant. And this is a fun thing I do. Most people say, well, it's not a human being. I said, well, if it has a heartbeat as a human, it goes, yeah, maybe. I'm going, well, that's at 4 weeks. And most women don't even know that they're pregnant by then, right? So at 6 weeks, the skeleton is complete. And the electrical brainwaves, that's the other one I do. I said, well, okay, well, maybe it's not heartbeat. How about electrical brainwaves? And they're like, okay, yeah, maybe that's good. I go, well, that's at 6 weeks, right? And about 17% of abortions happen between this point and, so this is a really high point of abortions, right? At 8 weeks, organs are functioning, stomach, liver, kidney, brain, and all systems are intact. At 12 weeks, it's called the first trimester, right? At 88% or 1.14 million abortions happen before first trimester. So at this point, most of the abortions have already happened. At 16 weeks, the number of abortions start to taper off. At 20 weeks, the fetus can actually survive the embryo. The baby can survive outside the womb in intensive care. At 24 weeks, the baby starts to look like that. There was a baby called Sarah Marie. She was operated for spina bifida at week 24 while she was still inside her mother's womb. That's her hand. And there she, well, I shouldn't say today because that was like 3 years ago. Hopefully she doesn't look like that today. Okay, at 28 weeks and then at 32 weeks. And most babies are born at 40 weeks. People say it's 9 months. It's really closer to 10 months, folks. Women will tell you that, right? Because they don't know they're pregnant until the last 9 months, but usually for the first 4 weeks they don't know. Okay. What is an abortion? An abortion is a surgical procedure usually done by a doctor to kill a fetus/baby in its mother's womb. Okay, we're going to look at 4 of the abortion methodologies. Remember first, abortion is legal at any point in America, except for some of the states, right? Even up to the 40th week, as long as the baby's head has not cleared the birth canal. Now, what's interesting or sad is that California tried to pass a law that said that you cannot investigate a baby's death if the death was a perinatal death. Perinatal could mean anything up to 28 days after the baby is born. I can't remember if it was AB. Anybody remember what the AB number was? 2 what? 22223. That's right. Right? Well, it's weird. It passed, but it didn't pass as a law. It passed committee. Right? And so I'll tell you a funny story. So, not a funny story, sad story. I was at a wedding a few months ago, right after this whole thing said, and there was some folks from another church there, and I said, "Hi, how's it going?" I said, I was at Sacramento the other day for this 22-23. I didn't see anybody from your church up in Sacramento protesting it. He goes, "Why?" I said, "AB 22-23." He goes, "What's that?" I said, "You mean your pastor never talked about it? He never said a word about it." He says, "No." I said, "Did you know that would allow babies to be killed until 28 days after they were born?" He goes, "No." I said, "Yeah, it is." Pulled it out, showed it to him. I said, "Tell me why your pastor didn't talk about it. Tell me why your pastor wasn't there." Anyway, so let me tell you the story of Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a little black boy. He was probably a teenager. Went down south from, I think he was in New York, and he went down south to see his cousins. And he walked into a store in the south, and they say that he whistled at a lady, some older lady. He was staying with his cousin. Two men, the lady's husband and her brother, showed up, picked up Emmett Till, beat him up, and killed him, and threw him in a lake, in a river. When they found his body, it was so unrecognizable that they said, "Look, you should have a closed casket funeral to his mom." His mom said, "No, we're going to have an open casket funeral." She shipped Emmett Till's body up, I think it was in New York, and they had an open funeral. And the press took pictures of Emmett Till. That movement, that fact that they saw how beat up this little kid was, led to Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. Why? Because now it had a face. And it let so many other people realize what was really going on. So, pictures are bad, but they are very powerful. So, this is a warning right now. I'm going to show you some pictures. If you can't stomach them, I would recommend you either step outside or close your eyes. I will tell you when it's safe to come back in. If you're in there, you can look through, somebody will come out and get you. But if you need to leave, this is the time to leave, okay? I'm going to show you some aborted babies. Ready? Okay. Saline salt solution. That is my daughter, 15 years ago, up in the top. Just to compare a regular baby to a saline salt baby. In the saline salt abortion, the fetus is burned out with a saline salt solution. The procedure burns the baby's lungs and bodies and poisons it, so it dies after an hour of pain. Here are two babies that were killed by saline salt abortions. Okay? DNC. In DNC abortions, dilation and curettage, the fetus is cut up into little pieces while it's still in the womb and then vacuumed up. Again, my daughter up in that corner, right? That's like 3 days after she was born, and a baby. These are done for smaller babies because they have to be cut up. The D&E, the dilation and evacuation. The doctor uses forceps of this for larger babies with teeth to grasp body parts to separate them from a body with twisting movement and to crush the skull, and then the body parts and the placenta are removed. And here you can see these are really fully formed babies. There's one less frequent procedure that we're going to talk about that's called the partial birth abortion. Right? Partial birth abortion are performed on babies that are over 20 weeks old. Right? It's so disgusting, I'm just going to show you cartoon pictures of it or diagrams of it. Basically, guided by ultrasound. So if you're not watching now, you can watch because there's no live pictures anymore. Basically, guided by ultrasound. This, by the way, was taken from a Senate hearing. Right? I think Rand Paul presented these pictures. Guided by ultrasound, the abortionist grabs the baby's leg with the forceps. The baby's leg is pulled out into the birth canal. The abortionist delivers the baby's entire body except for the head, and then the abortionist jams scissors into the baby's skull. The scissors are then opened to enlarge the hole. The scissors are removed, and a suction catheter is inserted. The child's brains are sucked out, causing the skull to collapse, so that baby is dead inside the womb, and then the baby is delivered. There was nothing to prevent that baby from surviving. If the baby was 23 weeks old, it could have survived fully outside. This was the ruling that Obama voted against, right? This was also the ruling that New York wanted to pass and tried over and over again to pass. We had a federal ban against partial birth abortions due to this presentation. So my question is, do you think we should do something to stop abortions? Somebody came up and said to me, well, unless you're a woman, you have no right to talk about abortion. Now, the first thing is, 7 men decided abortions were legal. Why did they get to decide anything about abortion? Number one. Secondly, here's my answer to them. Unless you've been aborted, you have no right to talk about abortions. And let me introduce you to 3 people who have been aborted. Gianna Jessen, born alive after a saline abortion. She has cerebral palsy as a result of abortion, but is an accomplished speaker and a marathon runner. I've heard her speak in person. I've met her, and she says abortion is a bad idea. Nick Hoot, right? He was aborted. He lost his legs and 1 arm. Actually, I had a third picture, but apparently I took that out in the interest of time. So only I'm going to show you these 2, right? Nick Hoot says abortions are wrong, and he's a pro-life speaker, walks around and giving talks. New York, 2019, New York Democratic Platform passed a bill that said children like Nick and Gianna should be left to die. If they were born in an abortion that failed, they should be left to die. Right? So the question is, do you think we should do something to stop abortions? Do you see why we need to talk about it? This is real. It is coming to our state. It's coming to all these states back. Now, there are good states that are going to stop it. Idaho, it's probably going to stop. Oklahoma has already stopped it. Many states have stopped it completely. But California is now touting, oh, come to California, you can have an abortion. You can have a medical trip with your abortion. And companies are saying, oh, we'll fly you to have an abortion. Right? I recommend if you find any companies that do that, you don't give them any of your money. I just got an email from Carbon Health saying, oh, we are really disgusted by the abortion ruling. We want to tell you that we're completely committed to abortion and we will support your right to choose any time. And so I left them a very nice email. I don't know if anyone will read it. I said, well, thank you very much for saying that. Me and my family and I will never, ever use you ever again in our entire life until you realize that this is a very stupid idea because 53% of the country is pro-life. And I'll show you that. Okay. Yeah. So, and in fact, it's a nice, if like Dick's Sporting Goods, you're going, oh, I really like that. But you know, because of your stance for abortion, I'm not going to buy anything. Goodbye, have a nice day, and leave, right? Now, the poor employee, you're just working there, right? But that gets passed on, right? So don't yell at the employee. He had probably nothing to do with it. Okay. But you see why we need to learn about this. And these are the kind of things. So most important, and here's where the abortion reasons. This is very important that we understand why people have abortions. Now, this is a few years old, but it's probably still very concurrent. Okay, the number 1 reasons for why people have abortions, anybody know? Money, inadequate finances, right? Second reason, well, that's not actually number 1, that's pretty high up there. The second reason, not ready for a baby is actually the highest reason, inconvenience, right? Number 3, problems with the relationship, unmarried. Too young, I should really reorder this, but too young, not mature enough. Children are grown. Women has all she wants. Fetus has possible health problems. This is like Down syndrome, right? Women has a health problem, 4%. Life of the mother, 0.2%. Pregnancy caused by rape or incest, less than 0.5%. And then everything else is other. Career, student, ashamed of. The average number of reasons, people give multiple reasons. So note that only 0.7% of abortions are for rape or incest, and only 3% are for the health of the mother. This is not the life of the mother, this is the health of the mother. And that health of the mother could be mental health, it could be a disease, it could be a number of different things. But if you look at all that, 99.3% of all abortions are for convenience. Here's the problem. We have a battle just amongst our Christians. Evangelical Christians, all adults, 35%, restricted or illegal, 63% of people think that abortion should be restricted. You're like, oh, wait, I thought we were a minority. No, most people think abortion should be restricted. Now, some of them say restricted third trimester, some of them say, but all over the place, but most of them say that. Now, in evangelicals, 63% should be illegal under any reason. But 33% say it should be legal. Now, who are these 33%? And these are the 33% I want to reach. Because we need to move these people over to the side. Catholics are even more interesting. Because I would have thought this was not that number. I would have thought Catholics would be like 10% are legal and everybody else was like illegal, right? 90% would be illegal. But no, it's that. Okay. Non-evangelical white Protestants, right? Now, this is a strange number for me. Because blacks I understand, but Mexicans? Non-evangelical. Oh, white Protestant. Okay, sorry. Yeah. That's so just the whites. I misunderstood that. Okay, yeah. So this actually makes sense. But if you go to black communities, they think abortion is okay. If you go to the Mexican community, they think abortion is wrong. Okay. You would. That's why I was really surprised when I saw that. Okay, let's come back to the main point of class. I want to teach you how to change people's minds about abortion without using the Bible. Okay? So this is the secular reasons as to why abortion is wrong, scientifically, philosophically, and rationally. Okay? Let's start with how to diffuse 5 potential emotional bombs ahead of time. Now, these are the 5 bombs. Before we start discussing abortion, you will be faced with these 5 bombs. Rape, incest, life of the mother, contraception, and rights. Okay? So these are the things. Let's look at first rape and incest, okay? I believe by the end of the session, you will have valid reason to ban abortion, even in the case of rape or incest, right? But I think they're very emotional issues. And whatever you believe it, let's first get people on our side, and then we'll argue about the rape and incest, right? If I'm going to pass a law, I would include rape and incest in it. But if I'm arguing or discussing this with somebody, I would say, look, for now, we're going to put rape. I'm going to write them down, and I'll come back to them later. Why? Because let's talk about the non-rape and incest ones. Because they'll keep coming back. This is the rabbit trail. Well, what about rape? No, I agree. Great question. Rape and incest. We'll come back to that later. Let's talk about the non-rape or incest, right? So we put that aside. And besides, if you think about the rape or incest, that's less than 0.5%. Right? I don't want to lose this battle for 0.5%. I think it's important. But I don't want to fight that battle yet, okay? So while we can justify a pro-life position for rape and incest, let's fight the 99.3 or 99.5% of the battle first. Okay, how about life of the mother? If there is a question of the life of the mother, you always save the mother, right? There's a very small number of cases where you have to choose between the baby or the mother. That's simply because with today's technology, you can many times wait till week 24, do a cesarean, put the child in intensive care, and the baby is fine, and the mother can get whatever treatment they want, right? In exceptional cases where you have a tubal pregnancy, both the mother and the child will die if you don't do anything. So the only one you can save at this point, you can't save the baby because the technology isn't there to extract the baby and put it in an artificial womb, so you have to save the mother. It's really simple, right? So less than 0.2% of abortions are done to save the life. We always save the mother. This is a very clear biblical principle, right? Now, I want to say that, though. I've seen a couple of cases where the mom chose not to have an abortion and not to undergo treatment until the baby was born. In some cases, the mom died, but that's her own choice. Nobody's forcing her to do it. In other cases, the mom got healed. Because it turns out that when you have a child, the stem cells from the baby actually migrate into the mother and heal the mother. There are cases of women who had heart disease and heart trauma, and the stem cells from their child actually heal their heart. Right? And there were other cases where women had all sorts of diseases, and then while they were pregnant, the diseases went away. Right? So you never know, you never want to make that decision unless you understand. But life of the mother to save the mother, right? Okay, contraception. The answer to contraception is, now, if you're not Catholic, we're okay with contraception. But there are certain kinds of contraception we're not okay with. So we are in favor of any type of contraception unless it kills a human being. Okay? And we'll hear more about that. So, now let's look at rights. Are the rights of the convenience of the mother greater than the rights of the life of the unborn. So we're going to put rights down here. Convenience of the mother. So these are rights of the mother, rights of the child, right? So there are 4 different types of cases. 1, convenience of the mother, convenience of the child. Who wins? The rights. Does the mother have more right over the convenience of the child, or the child has more rights over the convenience of the mother? We're not talking about life. We're talking about rights. Convenience. Just convenience. Let's say the mother's inconvenienced by having a child, but the child is inconvenienced. So in other words, you're just looking at convenience, right? So, in other words, if the convenience of the child is the mother is going to be inconvenienced or the child is going to be inconvenienced, you can inconvenience the mother. Okay, now let me go through this. So this is not a moral issue, right? And you'll see what I mean by that. Okay, life of the mother, convenience of the child. What wins? Life, right? So the mother wins in this case, life. Okay, what about the convenience of the mother and the life of the child? Life wins, right? Now, what about life of the mother and life of the child? Life of the mother, right? So the only one here is convenience of the mother and life of the child. Now, how many abortions are done for the convenience of the mother? 99.3% or whatever, right? This is where the entire argument is that we're talking about. So somebody says, I've had this over and over. Well, it's my body, my right. Yes, but we're talking about you're not putting your right, your convenience against the child's convenience. You're putting your convenience against the child's life. And the life of the child or anybody trumps over. Let's say I'm walking down the street and a guy says, I need help. Somebody's trying to kill me. Can I jump in your car? I'm like, well, my car is clean and, I don't want it to get dirty. What am I supposed to do? I let him jump in the car, right? Because my convenience does not trump his life. And nobody thinks that that's a good moral issue, right? Okay, now somebody say, well, you can't make a law against it. I think you can. So, convenience of the mother, life of the child, this is 99% of abortions. So if you get that argument about life versus convenience, remember, just draw a table, say who gets to over-trump whom. Does the convenience of the child trump the convenience of the mother? No. Does the life of the child trump the convenience of the mother? Yes, every single time. Okay, so let's keep going. How to reduce the argument to a single issue? What time is it? I want to take a break halfway through, so we'll take a break in about 15 minutes or so. Okay. Anytime you get into an abortion argument, I want you to reduce it to one single issue. Okay? This is the male question. Never forget this question. Let's say you have a kid. Or if that's too much, let's say you have a kid brother. You're sitting at your computer with your back to him. And he walks in. And he says, hi, Mom, or hi, sister, or can I kill this? What is it, right? What is it? Is your first question. Do you answer anything? Do you even try to answer the question without asking this question? No, you don't. Because look, if it's a roach, yes, kill it. If it's the next door neighbor's puppy, you have a problem. But if it's the next door neighbor's pesky 4-year-old child, you might have a maniac on your hands. What is it? Why do you ask what is it? Because that's how you decide. What is it that you're going to kill? Right? So, if somebody asks you if abortion is okay, you try to argue if abortion is, the first thing you say, what is it that you are aborting? What is it? And I ask this question all the time, and they go, it's a clump of cells, a product of conception. Nowadays, they're going to say, well, it's a baby. And then you get into the, well, you Nazi, but but the problem is if the unborn is not human, then you don't need to justify abortion. Kill it. What are you killing? If you're killing a lump of cells, go ahead. Go for it. If it's a tumor, go kill it. I don't care. But if the unborn is human or we can't be sure, then you cannot justify abortion. Unless you want to talk about Hitlerian moral values. And that's the real question here, right? So, abortion discussing technique, reduce 90% of all issues to what is it? And if you're talking to someone who's considerate and thinking, they will say, yeah, that's a good question. But most of the time, you're talking to people who don't want the consequences of the logic to affect their decision. And so they're just going to say, no, I don't want to argue about that, or they'll change the topic. Okay, so let's look at all the questions. I want to talk about everything that abortionists use. I'll give you a general trend, and then we'll have a little discussion time about these. The first one is coat hangers. I'll kind of I'll try to show you how this works, and then I want you guys to answer it yourself. And then you'll find out that most of these are real easy to answer. Okay, coat hangers. That was the first one. Abortion is a private matter between women. The background behind coat hangers is that women would give themselves abortions using coat hangers if we make abortion illegal, right? Then the third one, most poor women cannot afford another child. Women should not be forced to bear an unwanted child. Unwed, abused children, quality of life, deformed or handicapped children, what do you do about them? Adoption is too painful for the mother. I actually had somebody say that. And it was interesting because a pro-choicer said, are you crazy? She said, well, I don't think we should allow abortion. He said, well, and I said, what about adoption? And she said, well, man, adoption would be too painful. And the pro-choicer goes, are you crazy? You would rather kill a baby than adopt it out? Opposition to abortion is based on religious beliefs so that it should not be imposed on people without those beliefs. Don't impose your morality on me. If you're opposed to abortion, don't have one. Until you can take care of unwed mothers and provide care for all the children, you can't oppose abortion. Number 11, overpopulation. Number 12, pro-life rhetoric causes fanatics to bomb clinics and kill people. Number 13, how can you as a man speak to this issue? This is about a woman's right to choose. We already answered that, but I'm going to give you a different way to answer it. It's a woman's body. She should be allowed to do what she wants with her body. Number 15, abortion is a very complicated issue, and we should not be making decisions for others. 16, rape, incest, life of the mother. We already talked about. 17, pro-lifers are hypocritical and believe in capital punishment. So how do we deal with all those issues? And there may be more, and in my actual paper, I go through a bunch more, because over time, I get more and more of these, okay? So, how do we deal with this? Well, to diffuse every argument and bring it back to the primary argument, ask the person to replace fetus with a 1-day or 1-month-old baby and see if the logic still stands. So let me give you an example of how it works. Here's how it works. If they say or imply fetus, replace it with a 1-day-old baby. If they say or imply abortion, replace it with killing a 1-day-old baby. If they say or imply choice, replace it with the choice to kill a 1-day-old baby. Okay? And you see as we go through these cases that this actually makes them think. And at some point, they'll get frustrated with you because you keep bringing it back. Remember, focus or perish every time. But always listen to them because they have an objection. You say, if it's a valid objection, you write it down. If it's a stupid exception, you still write it down because you don't want to insult them, right? You do want to deal with them. And they may see it as a valid objection. You may not. Okay. So as we go through these cases, people will say, they will then come back and say, but you're assuming that the fetus is human. Because I am assuming the fetus is human. And I'll say, yes, it does exactly assume, it does depend on if the fetus is human or not. And so I often have to say is, are you ready to talk about if the fetus is human? And then we can jump to that portion. But meanwhile, so let's first deal with our objections, but at the end of it, we have to deal with if the fetus is human. Because I'm asking, what is it, right? So is the fetus human? If it is, I got to show it. Or do I? And we'll talk about that. Okay. So remember, if the unborn is not human, then no justification is needed for abortion. If the unborn is human or we're not sure, then no justification is sufficient. So let's take the first one. Coat hangers. And this was a bumper sticker, a real bumper sticker. It says, when your right to a safe and legal abortion is finally taken away, what are you going to do? Question mark was a coat hanger. In fact, Ashcroft just doesn't understand. Ashcroft was the Attorney General, right? And he was talking about, he was a Christian, didn't want abortion. Okay. So this is how, so the idea basically, pro-choice advocates walk around telling us that we must keep abortion safe and legal because otherwise women will die due to back alley abortions. First of all, the statistics don't prove this to be the case at all. But before we get that, here's how you answer it. I agree with you. If the fetus is not human, we should permit abortions by licensed doctors. I agree 100%. If the fetus is not human, I agree with you. But what is it? Will you agree with me that if the fetus is human, then this is not a valid excuse to allow abortions? Because that would be like saying, when your right to safely and legally kill your 1-month-old baby is finally taken away, what are you going to do? See what I did there? When your right to a safe and whoops, and then the next one is when your right to a safe and legal bank robbery is finally taken away, what are you going to do? Right? I'm just giving you an example, right? The idea is when your right to a safe and legal abortion is finally taken away, you're just changing that to safely and legally kill your 1-month-old baby is finally taken away, what you're going to do. And then you honestly see what happens when you extend it to other crimes. The issue, then they'll say, well, you're assuming it's a baby. I agree, I'm assuming the baby. Are you ready to talk about if it's a baby or not? But they're not, because they're going to have 5 more of these objections before you're ready to talk about if it's a baby or not. Because then they'll think of something else, and they'll come back, and you're like, great question, let's write it down, right? So I try to go through a few of these until they're like, okay, I understand, right? So, but let's talk about coat hangers, the whole coat hangers things. Okay, most abortions were done before Roe v. Wade was passed. Most abortions were done by doctors who illegally, in their own offices, were done by doctors illegally in their own offices, not who illegally. Most abortions were done by doctors illegally in their own offices, not by butchers in the back alley, right? It wasn't like somebody was using a coat hanger. Very few people died with coat hangers, right? In fact, in 1960, all states, abortion was illegal. Only 289 women died a year. In 1966, all states were illegal. 120 died a year. By 1972, only 16 states had legalized abortion. This is before Roe v. Wade passed. And they didn't like that. And so in 1993, they pushed abortion, so all states were legal, and still 20 a year died. Now, what happened between this 120 number and 39 is the antibiotics kicked into. They were readily available, and so less and less people were dying from infections. Right? But the point being that that number is not in the thousands. It's not in the tens of thousands. Women are not going to be falling over dead in back alleys. But even if they were, the question is, what are you killing? Do we legalize murder because murderers are dying? But then they'll say, well, you're assuming abortion is murder. Exactly. You're ready to talk about if the baby is a human being. Or the fetus is a human being. Okay. So I'll give you a few more. Abortion is a private matter between a woman and her God. Right? Abortion is a personal decision best left in the hands of a woman and her God. Well, remember, you try it. If they say imply fetus replaces a 1-hour-old baby. If they say imply abortion replaces with killing a 1-hour-old baby. If they say imply choice, replace with the choice to kill my 1-hour-old baby. Okay. How does this thing change? Abortion is a personal decision best left in the hands of a woman and her God. How do you change that? Killing a 1-month-old baby is the best decision in the hands of a woman or a God. Now you ask yourself, is that a good, killing her 1-hour-old baby is a personal decision? Is this true? No. It's horrendous. And then they'll say, well, is it really a baby? Okay, see, you'll get this back. So, okay, let's do a couple more. Most poor women cannot afford another child, so it's okay to allow abortions. Yeah, exactly. Most poor women can afford another child, so it's okay to allow poor women with 1-hour-old children to kill them. Right? You're getting the answer. You see that? Okay, so I'm going to go through all these really quick. I was going to do a discussion time, but we're not going to break into 2. So what I want to do is, let's see, what time is it? I said we'll take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break. We've been going an hour and a half. And then we'll come back and we'll wrap this up with, we'll do a few more of these and then we'll wrap it up. So 10 minutes? 5 minutes, what do you think? 5-minute break. Steve wants to keep going. 5-minute break. It's 8:34. We'll be back at 8:40. And while you're at it, you can try the next one. Actually, this one. I'll leave it as.
1973. I was 15. I got pregnant. And my family wanted me to have an abortion, so it's legal.
Hey, hopefully, it's a great crowd. You guys are really. Okay, let's keep going. So I'm going to give a few more examples of this what is it thing, and then we can move on. Okay, so most poor women cannot afford another child, so it's okay to allow poor women with 1 hour-old children to kill them. Would we allow a woman with a 1 hour-old baby to kill it if she suddenly lost her job and couldn't afford to feed it, right? Let's say you had a baby, and then while she's, well, not 1 hour, maybe it's a 1 week-old baby, and she finally finds out, oh, you know what, don't come back to work. You're fired. And can she go drown the kid? Well, according to California, 2223, maybe she could, right? Then, of course, how to reduce more unwanted abuse, children, quality of life, deformed, handicapped. This is one that you're going to get often. The argument was if that unwanted children would be abused, and I've heard this so many times. They will have, I hear this often on these abortions. There's a Facebook post called Abortion Uncensored. And the reality is, I only go on it to hear their arguments, not because I think that I can convince anyone, because it's uncensored. But there are some hardcore pro-lifers on it that valiantly are arguing there. Occasionally I'll jump in to support them. But the reality is that most people there are not really open to changing their mind, but it's a great place to get the arguments. So this argument comes over and over and over and over again. This one and the other one is that you Christians don't care about poor people. And the big argument is, oh, you care about the fetus, but you don't care about the born child, right? And I think we have time to address that, but that hopefully I'll have a chance to address it. Anyway, so the idea is if you let women abort unwanted babies, there will be less child abuse, was the first thing. Of course, the simple answer is if you ban the killing of 1 hour-olds, you will have unwanted and you will have less unwanted. Oh yeah, if you ban the killing of 1 hour-old babies, you will have unwanted and abused 2-year-old children, right? Meaning that you should have killed them when they were young, right? Obviously that makes no sense. It's ridiculous. But reality is that when abortion was first legalized, the pro-choice people said that child abuse would be stopped or at least be reduced. But on the contrary, in the years since abortion was legalized and become commonplace, child abuse has increased 200% or more. Obviously, abortion on demand has not stopped child abuse. It's time to try a different solution. Now, think about it. Mother Teresa said this very clearly. The reality that if you're willing to kill a baby that's in the womb, the safest place a baby is supposed to be, the most innocent of all lives, how much more will you be tending to hurt those that are born? Because you just don't understand the value of life, right? So that's what she's saying. It starts right there, and you've hardened yourself to them. So aborting mentally retarded or deformed fetuses would save them from very painful life. This is a variation on that theme, right? And I've heard this many times from my pro-choice friends. They'll say, well, we think they should be aborted. Well, you're just saying aborting mentally retarded, deformed 1-year-olds will save them from a very painful life, right? Just again, change it. And you can keep doing this. I'll go through a few more. Remember this slide? It's not unrealistic. This lady said exactly that. Okay, let's skip to number 9 on our list. If you're opposed to abortion, don't have one. Well, this is really easy, right? And this is a bumper sticker, right? Against abortion, then don't have one. And you might have seen some of these, and they're going to show up again, right? Well, how do you respond to that? If you're opposed to what? Murder, or you're killing your 1-year-old child. Yeah. Yes, go for it. Don't shoot up at school, right? If you're opposed to killing your 1-year-old child, don't kill it. But don't stop me from killing my 1-hour-old child, right? You see, the argument fails when you expand it to this logical conclusion. Again, we're not saying you should mock them. We just say, look, do you understand how this does not work? This is not a good argument. You've got a faulty argument. It's faulty logically, it's faulty rationally, and it's faulty ethically. Now, this one is the one I get. And I had discussion time. We don't have time for that, but normally we get into discussion. We do this over 2 weeks. Actually, we did this when I did this with the junior high kids. We did it like over 5 weeks. And at the end of 5 weeks, I told them I told them at the beginning they better pay attention, because at the end of 5 weeks, I'm going to bring somebody who's pro-choice, and they have to debate her. And I would not be involved. I would just be the moderator, right? And that went really well. It was funny. The 5th graders and 6th graders, the 6th graders and 7th graders were more active than the 8th graders. But what was funny is that they kept saying, Mr. Neil Malman says this. I'm like, no, don't quote me. I'm not the authority. I'm giving you the argument which should stand without my quote being quoted, right? Pardon? Yes, I was going, okay, yeah. So I should tell you that story. So here I am. It's a group of, it turns out, the class actually had high schoolers in there too. But, and I was like, oh, man, I don't know if I should do abortion for 6th graders. But the pastor said, no, dude, you got to do it, right? so we did it, and it was a 5-week thing. And week 3, I get a call from the pastor. He goes, there's a mom who wants to speak to you. I'm like, oh, man. So I go, okay, fine. So she said, I'm like, I don't have an office, right? I'm an engineer. And I said, do you want me to come in? He said, no, she'll speak to you after the next class. I said, well, that's a good sign that she's not going to pull her kid from it. She's actually going to come pick him up. So I meet her afterwards, and she says, I had a question for you. And I said, oh, okay. About this topic. I said, yeah, I figured. Well, she said, well, my son has really been listening to you. I'm thinking, okay, here it comes. She wants to argue. She wants to say that she should pull him out. I have no idea where this is going. And she goes, so he's actually arguing with me about this topic. I'm thinking, oh, maybe she wants me to tell the kids to lighten up or something. And she said, in fact, the 2nd week after your class, he came home and he was arguing with me about it. And suddenly he stopped. He looked at me and said, you've had an abortion, haven't you? I'm like, oh. I'm thinking, she's going to yell at me because her kid asked her if she's abortion. And I didn't know what to say. I wasn't going to say anything. She goes, so should I tell him I have? And I said, wow. Wow. I mean, first of all, understand, her son was so persuasive that his mother who was probably on the fence about this, was now hesitant. I said, first of all, you know your son better than I do. That's your relationship with him. I don't think as a parent you're required to tell him. You can just not discuss it. We may figure it out. He's an intelligent kid. I said, but you know what that relationship is. I can't tell you whether you should tell him. I said, and if you choose to tell him now or never, that's fine, but you should not lie to him. You should just avoid the issue, or just say, we'll talk about it when you're older, kind of thing, right? I don't know what she decided to do, but the point is that junior high kids follow this, and they follow the logic, and they can argue it. So don't be hesitant to train them up in the way they should go. So that was the story. Anyway, so this is the argument that I get often. This is the second biggest argument I get. You Christians care about the unborn, but you don't care about the born. Right? You must first take care of unwed mothers and provide care for children, or you can't oppose abortion. Right? Well, the first question is, what is it? Do I have to first take care of babies before I can allow you to kill a 1-day-old baby? Right? And then my question is, okay, so let's say I'm walking down the street and I see my next door neighbor is killing his 4-year-old. Do I have to stop and think, okay, am I ready to adopt this 4-year-old, send him to college, take care of him for the rest of his teen life, adult life, until he's an adult, before I can save his life? No, it's not relevant. The point is I need to save him, right? That's what I first must do. Now, given that, however, the reality is this is not the case. The reality is that, quite simply, Christians take care of the unborn and the born. In fact, I do a whole talk where I explain all the different ways where we take care of the born. The only reason people think we don't want to take care of the born is we don't want the government to do it. We think government welfare doesn't work. So we're saying, don't have the government send money. We will take care of you ourselves. In fact, more Christians adopt babies than any other group. And people say, well, there aren't enough people who want babies. I say, no, there's a waiting list for unborn. And there's a waiting list for born. And the only reason that you have trouble with the system, with the CPS, is because those aren't kids up for adoption. Those are kids from broken homes, and CPS does not want to let them go. They're making $4,000 a child. I'm not saying every CPS guy. I'm just saying that in general, the system is not built for it. I'm not thinking that CPS people are going, oh, let's do this. But it's just designed for that automatic feedback loop where the kids don't get out of the system, and they don't want them to get out of the system. So the reality is quite simply that we take care of them. And most people who adopt kids aren't people who are childless. Most people who adopt kids are people who already have 2 to 3 or 4 kids. Right? It's actually an anomaly for a person without kids to adopt kids when you look at the number. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It happens all the time. But I'm saying, but if you look at the number of people who adopt kids who already have kids, it's far greater than the number of people who adopt kids who don't have kids. I have a pastor friend, neighborhood Bible church, right? He's got 10 kids. 4 are his. 6 are adopted. You know, I was like, at least I can never keep count. I'm like, how many more kids have you now, right? And he actually is the pastor who, he has started a group called Foster the Bay, right? Excellent group. And his idea is very simple, great idea. He wants every church in San Jose to foster 1 child. That means you don't need to foster the child. You find somebody in the church who is willing to foster a child, and the rest of the church comes around them. He says if they did that, they would have no kids in foster care in California, or in the system in California. They'll all be in foster homes, Christian foster homes, which is very important too. Okay. The other thing is that Christians take care of the unborn and the born, as I said. For instance, Jerry Falwell. Everybody hated Jerry Falwell. Did you know that if you got pregnant and you went to Liberty University and said, I am not going to abort my child, and you were not married, and you were underage, and you were of a certain economic class, they would give you a full scholarship to Liberty University, pay for all your child care, your birthing costs, and child care while you went to college. All right? Do you know who started the first orphanages? Christians. Do you know, in fact, in India, if you go to India today, and you can testify this, half the people learned English in Catholic schools or Protestant missionary schools, right? And then half the orphanages, in fact, most of the orphanages were run by Christians until recently. I had a friend of mine who was a Hindu. He was arguing with another Hindu, and one of the Hindu friends says, well, why do those Christians tell us, because you had to be a Christian to adopt out of the orphanage. Like you had to go to an orphanage and you have to say you're a Christian before they let you adopt a child. And he says, how come those Christians tell us how we can adopt our Hindu kids? Meaning that they're Hindu kids, they're left to die, and they're taken in the orphanage, and the church says, no, you've got to be a Christian to adopt them, right? And he was arguing about it. My other friend said, when you see a Hindu organization taking care of many kids, then you can say something. Until that time, you have no right to say anything. And now the government has gone in the picture, and so things have changed. But the government care is not the same as Christian care, right? Okay. By the way, in a recent survey, it's estimated that over 30% of all American couples would adopt if adoption was easier, and didn't cost as much. Okay, overpopulation real quick. This one is simple. We have to allow abortion because there's an overpopulation problem, right? Now, first of all, I think there's real quick over this. Did you know that if you took the density of downtown San Jose and you made Texas that density, the entire population of the world could fit in Texas? There's no shortage of space in this world. There is no shortage of water in this world. There is no shortage of coolness in this world. If you want to argue about global warming, we'll do that at a different time. There is no evidence for global warming that is being done by human beings, okay? And we'll argue about that later, and I can show you all the data for it. But let's say, for the argument that abortion, that there is a population issue. Now the question is, what are you killing? And always leads you to this thing. Ronald Wilson Reagan said, I notice that all pro-choice people have already been born. And you notice that most pro-choicers who quote this argument don't offer to kill themselves to reduce the population. Now, admittedly, some do offer not to have kids, and I have seen that. But the problem with that group of people is they die out, and they don't pass on their beliefs to anybody. There's a religious group. What was it, Shakers or something? Arguments? Show it to me. I'd be very interested in seeing them. And that was back then, right? In 200 AD. Oh, overpopulation. Okay. Pro-life rhetoric causes fanatics to bomb clinics and kill people, right? Now, unfortunately, has happened, and I think it's very sad. We should not be bombing clinics and killing people. And we can get into the ethical arguments. You know, somebody came up and says, well, why shouldn't we be bombing clinics? If they were killing Jews in the gas chambers, wouldn't you bomb the gas chambers, right? So this is a more difficult argument. Let me explain why this is not a good idea. Because it doesn't work. It turns the population against you. Right? We got to win their hearts and souls and go to the Supreme Court like we did, and that works a lot better, right? If this bombing was going on, then a lot of the country, we have what, 63% think that abortion should be limited or restricted or illegal? That would not be happening if you're going around killing a bunch of people, right? Now, notice that a lot of pro-life clinics are being bombed right now. Right? 96 of them. Okay, so the other side is doing exactly what they say we should not be doing. Okay. How can you a man speak about abortion? It's a woman's right to choose. How can you as a man speak about killing, if the fetus is human, then you just said, how can you as a man speak against killing one-day-old babies? It's about a woman's right to kill her one-day-old baby. Right? Yeah, I know. Now, here's the other thing. Now, what I found, this is a great point, and it's not in this presentation because it's really recent. I just remember a Supreme Court justice who didn't know what a woman was. So why is this about a woman's right to choose? It reminds me of a tweet I read, right? This woman goes, if you don't have a womb, you have no right to speak about it. And somebody said, if you're not a woman and don't have a womb, you have no right to speak about it. And somebody said, wait, are you transphobic? Are you saying men can't have wombs? And the tweeter said, oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to insult any of the trans community. I'm like, oh, my Lord. Now, and by the way, 50% of all fetuses killed are male in America. But in India, most of the babies killed are women. Right? In China, most of the babies killed are women. And now they have a 2-child policy. It used to be a 1-child policy, and that really messed up. Okay. By the way, if you look at this gender, it turns out more women are pro-life than men. This is 2019. 51% of all women were pro-life. If you go to a pro-life thing, you'll see most of them are women. Right? Okay. This is just a collage of. Okay. It's a woman's body. She should be allowed to do what she wants with the body. So the first question is, what is it? If the fetus is a human, then is it a part of the woman's body? No, and we're going to talk about that. So she's not allowed to do something with somebody else's body. So we've got to now argue what's part of the body. Again, over and over, people are like, is it human? Why you're saying it's human? They'll keep coming back. Okay. And then I'm going to skip a bunch of these. Abortion is a very complicated issue. We should not be making decisions for other people. Killing one-day-old babies is a very complicated issue. We should not be making decisions for others. There was Susan Smith. She killed her 2 sons, Michael, because they were inconvenient to her. So can I, as a man, speak about that? Pro-lifers are hypocritical. So this is the one. Last one is pro-lifers are hypocritical and believe in capital punishment. Well, this is actually just a mixing of words, right? When I say I'm pro-life, it's such a shortened contraction to say I don't think you should have abortions, right? It does not mean I'm pro-life for insects. It does not mean I'm pro-life for chickens or very tasty beef, grass-fed beef. Okay? It's specifically about human beings and specifically about innocent babies, right? So, obviously, pro-life means something, right? It's not a generic term. So when I say I'm pro-life, don't apply it to anything that I mean. Besides, you say you're pro-choice. Are you pro-slavery? Obviously, you mean pro-choice. I know what you mean when you say pro-choice, that you mean abortion, right? You're pro-choice about having an abortion. So I understand what you mean. So let's focus, right, guys? And I've had this argument so many times. Like, I say, by the way, I'm pro-life for innocent life. So it's got nothing to do with capital punishment. We can argue about that. I'm pro-life about innocent life. It's got nothing to do with war, right? There's a just war theory we can talk about. All these other things, okay? So I always try to bring it back. And then, of course, unless you've had an abortion, how can you speak against it? Unless you've been in a situation where you've needed abortion, how can you condemn it? Oh, I thought that was the last one. Okay. You don't know what it's like. Well, I think I added this later. And then, of course, you just change it to unless you've killed a one-day-old baby, how can you speak against it? Unless you've been in a situation you've needed to kill a one-day-old baby, how can you condemn it? You don't know what it's like, right? And then, of course, I use the right way. Unless you've been aborted, you can't speak for abortion. You can't say it's okay. And then we bring up Gianna Jessen again, right? So I think, and there's a bunch. Oh, yeah, here are the others. Sarah and Betty Smith, she was adopted. She was aborted. Heidi was aborted. I think, Tina was aborted. Ana Rosa was aborted. Ximena Reynolds was aborted. Again, all these were their adopted parents. And so this is a long list, right? Okay. So again, remember this, right? So these are the things. Okay, so let's jump right into the women. We already covered that, so on it. And remember, if the unborn is not human, then no justification is needed for abortion. But on the other hand, the unborn is human. If we're not sure, then no justification is possible. Okay, let's go into how to prove. This is the last but one. How to prove that a fetus is a human or something we don't know. Because this is what we're going. We want to get to this point, right? We want to get to this point over. So, proving the unborn are human without using the Bible. And we've already said this. I repeat it because usually we do this over a couple of days, and so I have to repeat some of the parts. Okay. So there are 5 points that we're going to use to prove the unborn is human. So first of all, don't argue about when the fetus gets its soul. Okay? It's because that's a biblical argument. Religious argument. 2, apply that criteria of humanness to a mentally handicapped, unconscious 1-year-old baby. Right? 3, prove the fetus is not part of the woman's body. Yes, that's a baby's foot. All right? 4, use the SLED. And number 5, use DNA thing, right? So let's, actually, I think, yeah. So let's jump right into Scott Klusendorf. I got a lot of my stuff at Scott Klusendorf, right? By the way, when my kids were in their womb, one thing, my wife has this, she gets hiccups a lot. And while the kids were in the womb, they would get hiccups. And she'd go, oh, Mary Catherine has the hiccups. I'm like, really? And you could hear her going, in the womb, right? Now, who's having the hiccups? Is Anna having the hiccups? No. Somebody else is having the hiccups, right? So let's use the SLED. The SLED stands for 4 things. And whenever you get into an argument about proving the unborn is human, you want to use this. And I got this from Greg Kokel, who got it from Scott Klusendorf. They work together. They're great guys. If you ever get to hear them speak about this, again. Scott Klusendorf is amazing. He does this pro-life training, and I would recommend that you get it if you can. So let's talk about the SLED. The first, the S, anytime people say the unborn is not human, you start using this. What is different between the unborn, the baby in the womb, and the baby outside is size, right? First things. The size make a difference between someone being human or not human. Is a smaller human being less human than a large human being? Is a 3-year-old less human than a 5-year-old? No. 3-year-old may act less human, but he's not less human, right? Right? So is a preemie that is 2 pounds any less human than a baby that's 8.5 pounds? No. So size has to be eliminated. You can't use size to determine humanity, right? Everybody agree? 2, level of development, right? Many pro-choicers will claim that the fetus is not human because part of its body is not developed, right? Now, it's true that the unborn are less developed than newborns, but that's morally irrelevant. A newborn, for that matter, is less developed than a toddler. A toddler is less developed than an adult, right? You don't kill toddlers because they're not humans or they're less humans. You don't determine humanity on their level of development. And if you have somebody who was an adult and suddenly gets mentally disabled, that's in a car crash and can't function normally, do they become less human? No, they're still human. So humanness has nothing to do with level of development or ability, right? Okay. Now, so what makes you a human? A person is one with the innate capacity to grow and give rise to personal acts. Okay? For instance, somebody on the Abortion Uncensored Facebook post stuck a truck, just the chassis of a truck being assembled, and says, pro-lifers be like, this is a truck. Right? And the idea was, look, it's not a truck because it's just the chassis of a truck. And my answer was, yes, if the truck would assemble itself, if you just provided its raw materials, then that would be a truck. But the trucks don't assemble themselves. They need somebody else to assemble it. Babies assemble themselves. You just give them the food and the water, and you can't help them anymore. They assemble themselves. When you have something that assembles itself and is human, then you know it's a human being. But it's not a truck. It's not a half human being. You were not, what's the right word? You were not a fetus that wasn't you and then became you after you were born. It was you the whole time. In fact, and the pro-lifers put you as a fetus, you as a baby, you as an adult, right? It's still you. So, and take, for instance, an unconscious person. The unconscious person does not have the capacity to do anything right then, but it doesn't make them less human, right? So, which gets you to, but the level of development, it doesn't look like a human. But it doesn't look like a human. Okay, well, what about this guy? He doesn't look like a human either. He got burnt. Most humans don't look like that. Right? But in actual fact, reality is this looks like a human at that age. And this looks like a human who got burnt. But they're both humans. Right? So you can't look at that and say, what is a human? What does a human look like between weeks 5 and 7? That's what they look like. The question is it genetically human? And if it's not genetically human, what is it? Right? Okay. So, what is it? If it's not human, what is it? We know it's a fetus. What kind of fetus is it? Is it a dog fetus? A cat fetus? Meat? Just a tissue? On the website, on the arguments that I get, somebody will put like an acorn seed, like an acorn, and they'll say, not a tree. And then they'll show an oak. And they say, an oak, not an acorn. I'm like, no, but there's still, what's the genus of this acorn? What is it? Well, it's the same DNA. Right? So you're just saying, not an adult, but a baby. But they're both a tree, right? They're both an oak. Okay, of the oak genus. Okay, so Scott Kusendorf says this. Look, if it's not a human, it is something else. What is it? He says, a potential X must be an actual Y. So if it's a potential human, what is it right now? Let's say, well, it's a potential human. Well, no, what is it? Not a human? You see, a human zygote at the moment of conception has all the genetic information it will ever have. It is not the same DNA of its mother or of the father. It has 23 chromosomes from the father and 23 from the mother, right? 23 from the father and 23 from the mother. No genetic information will be added throughout its lifetime. Now, the only person that will share its genetic DNA is its identical twin. And that too only at birth. By the time they are older, their genetic DNA will diverge. Right? They will change due to mutations. Or one person spends more time in the sun, more time next to radiation. Their genetic DNA will change over time, right? So, there's nothing different between the zygote and you except for size and level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. So let's look at the next one. E stands for, whoops, where'd it go? Did I skip it? Oh, yeah. Why don't I have it here? That's weird. I must have, oh, yeah, I skipped. Let me go ahead, yeah. I'm still on the level of development. Okay. Some people say humanity is not the same as personhood. They may complain that just because something is human, it doesn't make it a human being or a person. You aren't sure there's a difference or have some vague ideas, but you still want to kill it? And I've had this people say, well, a baby is not a human being. It's not a person. I'm like, wait, when did you decide whether it was a person? What makes it a human being? What makes it a person? If you're going to tell me what it is, you have to define what it is. And it's human as something that's granted by the state. And other people have argued, the state has decided that the baby is not a person. Why does the state get to make that decision? Our rights don't come from the state. Where do our rights come from? God. And this is not a religious argument. This is a rational argument. Remember when I presented the whole idea of how rights come from God? That's not a religious argument. I never use the Bible to make that argument. And I say if the rights don't come from God, if there is no creator, then there are no rights. Now, Mr. Atheist, if you believe there are no rights, then we have a different problem here. But that's not an abortion question. Okay? So maybe a person has something to do with something else that we don't know. Well, if we don't know, we shouldn't be randomly killing things. We need to be able to answer what it is it first. Okay, so I want to jump ahead to environment. Does the environment make a difference of something human or not? If a baby in a womb different from a baby outside a womb? Let me give you a great example. See this? This is Timothy Keys. You know why he's important? Timothy Keys is a twin. But he was born a year earlier than his sister. Timothy Keys was born on October 15th. Why? Because Timothy had a problem with his heart. I believe it was his heart. I don't have it noted, but I remember he was the other part. So he was prematurely delivered, and they operated on him and put him in a hyperbaric chamber. His sister, Celeste, was kept in his mother's womb for the natural term. She was born in January the next year. So they're 3 months apart, 2 different years, not identical, fraternal twins, right? Now, think about this. Timothy is born, he is in the hyperbaric chamber after being operated. He is the defective one, if you will. Can you kill Timothy? No. His twin sister is still in the womb. Can you kill his sister? Yes, because the state says she's not human. What's the difference between the two of them? It's location, right? If Timothy is human because he's out of the womb, why is his sister, who is actually better health, more developed than he is, not also human? Obviously, location has no bearing on whether something is human or not, right? And this is the reality. And there's his mom, Simone, with the 2 kids after they were born. One you can see is a lot bigger than the other. Because Timothy was the weaker one, right? Okay. Now, the next one is degree of dependency. Some people say, well, okay, if somebody's dependent on somebody, then they're not human. But that's not true at all. You guys know who this guy is? How many people know who this is? Christopher Reeve, the older people know him. He was Superman. At least he acted in the movie Superman. Well, he had an accident. He had a horse riding accident, and he was totally paralyzed. He had a machine that had to breathe for him. He was totally dependent on the machine. In fact, in his biography, he says when he first got paralyzed, he was worried that the machine would stop and he would suffocate. And so to alleviate his concerns, they had like 2 or 3 backups. How about this guy? Is he human? He can't even talk. He couldn't even talk. He couldn't even move without a machine. So he's dependent on the machine. So his degree of dependency on somebody else make you human or less human. So the SLED, the 4 SLED things are SLED. So humanness does not depend on size, not depend on level of development, it's not dependent on environmental location, it's not dependent on degree of dependency, it's not dependent on looking like a human, it's not dependent on laws, it's not dependent if you're wanted or not. Right? I guess I should have been crossing these out as I went along. So the question that you're asking is, what makes something human? If there are 4, these are the 4 things you're using, or 7 things you're using, it's not going to work. So the next thing I do is I go to human DNA evidence. What is humanness dependent on? So I go to DNA. I say, look, does the fetus have human DNA? Yes! Now somebody say, well, the tumor has human DNA. Yes, it does. but it's corrupted DNA. It's not natural. And guess what? If you leave the tumor alone, it will kill you and it will die. If you leave the baby alone, it will be born and it will continue and it will give you kids and grandkids and great-grandkids and great-grandkids. Completely different things. So, it's irrational to say, oh, human DNA, right? I've already talked about it, okay. So it's irrational to say that a fetus is not human. It has life, it has its own unique DNA, and it is growing. Okay, so let me wrap this up. What if I can't convince them that the fetus is human? Then you get them to agree that no one knows when it's human. If I can get them to say, well, nobody knows when, and I've had this, I'll have this argument. I go, well, then, so nobody knows when it's human. So you have no right to tell me not to kill it. And to which I show them this picture. So imagine you're hunting in the woods. And you see something and you think it's a deer. But it may not be a deer. It may be a 4-year-old child. Can you kill it? What if you're 95% sure it's not a 4-year-old child? Can you kill it? What if you're 99% sure it's not a 4-year-old child? Can you kill it? When can you kill it? When you know it's not 100% and you've proved it, that you can actually see that it's actually a deer, not a child wearing a deer head, not a person in jeans, and right there, looks kind of creepy actually. It's a little deer head or something right there. Right? So the question is, if you're ever for some reason not 100, for some reason you could never be 100% sure it was human, should you ever shoot it? And the answer is no. So the real question is, who has to prove that the child is human before you can kill it? Do I have to try to prove that it's human before I don't let you kill it? In other words, do I have to say that the child is human, or do you have to prove that the child is not human? The burden upon proof is upon you to prove that the child is not human. Sorry, the fetus is not human. And I say, give me your 100% proof that the fetus is not human. And then I will let you kill it. Right? I mean, you can't go around killing things that may be human. So the burden of proof is upon them. Now, at this point, I've had people say, well, I don't know if it's human, so I wouldn't have an abortion, but I wouldn't stop you from having an abortion. And then I show them this picture. I go, let's say you're out hunting in the woods. And you see something that could be a deer. And you think, I don't think it's a deer, I think it's a human being. But the guy next to you goes, it's a deer. You go, I'm not sure. Can you let him shoot? I can't let somebody else kill something that could be human, especially when it's a bow hunter. See his bow? There's his bow right there. There's his hand, there's his elbow. You can't let somebody else shoot. And here's one that you should let people shoot. Well, actually, unless you're like Bambi. Do you see him? There's a bunch of them. So the reality is that you can't let anybody have an abortion unless they can prove 100% to you. And you can't say, I'm not going to have an abortion, I'm going to let somebody else have an abortion. So, if you're willing to allow someone else to kill something that may be human or may not be, you'd better be 100% sure it isn't human. Do you agree? Because even if you're slightly doubtful that it is human, you better not let even someone else kill it. So, do you think that most people who have abortions have a valid reason to kill this thing that may be human? Or do you think that most people kill them for convenience, as you've seen in the table? Right? And we see this over and over and over again. Right? Okay, let's wrap this up. We've gone late. What time is it? Wow, 9:20. Wow. Okay. So, some of our arguments. 1, no moral difference between babies and embryos. Not part of the mother's body. Has human. Oh, yeah, I didn't go into them, not part of the mother's body. I didn't spend enough time on it. Not part of the mother's body. And this is the way you prove it's not part of the mother's body. If a mother is pregnant with a baby or a fetus or an embryo, they say, well, this is part of my body. Well, no, it isn't. Because if it is a male baby, then you have both male and female DNA. Who has the other DNA? If it's if it's maybe 6 weeks old, then you have 2 heads, 4 hands, 4 legs, 2 kidneys, 2 hearts. Who owns the other heart and kidney? You? In fact, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you're going to defect, right. And here's the other interesting thing. There are some babies who can't give their mother blood transfusions because they have a different blood transfusion. They don't even have the same blood type. And what's amazing about the umbilical cord is that there's actually a filter that allows the mother's blood to nourish the baby without killing the baby because the baby has a different blood type. It's amazing how that evolved, isn't it? That's a joke. Okay, so you have to be 100% sure it's not a human before you can kill it or let others kill it. You can't just kill it if you aren't sure, right? All the excuses fall apart, except population control, women's issues, women dying, abortion, so on and so on. You need to provide the 100% proof that it's not a human now before you can allow somebody to have an abortion or before you should have an abortion. Let me talk about what can we do about it real quick. One, we can vote and vote for godly men and women, right? Because they're the legislators, right? 2, we are responsible to be active. Evangelism is not enough. Okay, and I've had this discussion many times in this group before. It took years after people became Christians for the laws against gladiatorial fights, racism, slavery, forced marriage, discrimination against women, oppression of the poor, and child labor to change. The notion that it's sufficient to merely evangelize people to bring about a just society is ridiculously naive. Laws must be made to protect life and liberty and rights. It's one of the reasons God institutes governments. If you care about true social justice, you will care about laws being made to protect the oppressed. So, you want to get active? You want to get out there, and I'll jump to this slide. You want to elect only politicians who will vote with a mindset towards banning abortion. And it's more important now, because every state now has a choice to decide whether they should allow abortion. So when people come and say, you know what, you should be careful and kind to people who are pro-choice, absolutely. But if they think that then you should let them do what they want, that's absolutely wrong. Because they're killing people. And it's the only conclusion I have come to. Now understand, I was not pro-life in the 80s. I thought, yeah, they're not human. And then I got into a few discussions and arguments, and I started researching it. I'm like, wow. Now, of course, I had no vested interest in it. I did have one experience with, and I'll close with the story. I had one experience with a gal in college. She was really cute. I was not married, obviously. And I was, I wasn't dating her, but I was trying to get to know her more and more. And then one day she shows up in my dorm room crying. And I said, what's going on? She goes, well, I'm pregnant, and so is my sister. And I said, oh. She goes, that's going to ruin my whole school and everything. I said, oh. She said, but I'm going to have an abortion and they'll fix it. And here I am, I don't know. I'm a Christian, but I'm a socialist and a Christian. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, sure, whatever, right? And then I think it was a year later, she comes back into my room. And she is weeping uncontrollably. And I'm like, what's going on? I haven't seen you in a while. She goes, yeah, well, after I had the abortion, I broke up with my boyfriend, and it was just terrible. I said, so is that why you're crying? He goes, no. Why are you crying? Well, my sister got pregnant at the same time. She just had her baby. She said, my sister dropped out of school, but that could have been me. I could have had a baby. She's so happy. What did I do? And for like 3 weeks, she would come to my room every so often and just cry bitterly, right? Wow, this is weird. Good thing I was celibate in college. I'm like, well, thank you for being that I was celibate. At least I knew that part. I was a socialist, but at least I was a celibate socialist, right? So, pardon? Yeah. So I think it traumatized her because she understood what had happened. And her sister apparently, I don't think she got married to the guy, but she seemed to do well. So, okay, so let me close with this. Will you be a prophet? Will you stand out? Because understand this, abortion actually destroys people. It destroys lives. I don't want to go into all that because I'm giving you the rational, not the emotional appeal of that. But it does, and there's real options. If you are pregnant, there's real options. There's lots of clinics that will take care of you. They will watch you. In fact, they will pay for your child care. They will pay for your health care. There's city team here in I think they still have their heritage home, where if you're homeless and decide to keep your child, they'll give you a place to stay. They will feed you. They will help you with all your healthcare needs, and then they will help you train you to get a job. Right? So Christians are always there, and they're always doing things. So that's closing prayer. We've been a long day. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this time again. We pray that people out here who will hear the word will understand that it is out of compassion for the unborn. It is actually also in compassion for the mothers, because I've seen way too many mothers who have regretted terribly what they've done, and the consequences of the realization of what they've done, Lord. We pray that you will bless everybody here and give them wisdom and courage to engage in love in this issue. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. We can do Q&A, or thank you. We can do Q&A if you want, but I know it's late, so if you need to leave, go ahead. I don't know if many of you want. Yeah. Question? Back there? Right here, yeah. Jared.
So, Ray Comfort, Living Waters, he has a thing where he talks about something along these lines, where he actually compares it to people during World War II, how they basically kept, the slippery slope.
Yeah.
And I'm going to totally not do this justice. He's talking about the tank driver, right? And it's like, well, if you're just burying the dead, then why does it matter? It's like, okay, well, what happens if they're still alive in that trench?
You're in a tank and you're running over people, right?
Yeah, you're tanking, running over people and stuff like this. Well, if you don't do it, I'm going to kill you. Are you still going to do it? And it's like that whole scenario he did. So I was like, is there ways to use that as a little bit more forceful in some of these conversations?
So wait, I didn't understand because I haven't seen that 180. I thought I'd seen it, but I don't remember that.
No, he does this is on the beach walks.
Okay.
In Southern California.
So what's the analogy?
The analogy is basically he's going through and talking about how, that just saying that, I'm not in charge.
Yeah. I'm just listening to orders. Right.
I'm just listening to orders, right? Like, that it's not, I'm not the one actually doing it.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, well then, what's the difference if the people in the trench are alive or not? Because he's basically talking about how, there was people in Nazi Germany that were basically ordered to just,
kill.
Drive tanks with plows over people, and if you didn't, they were going to shoot you. It's like, what do? You have to make up your mind and your decision what you're going to do long before you ever get to that point.
Yes.
Because other's you're
at that point, you don't really have a choice, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's like, how do we apply that type of thinking to?
You're exactly right. So the idea is right now, and determine this, right? And with kids too, determine this, that one, you will be celibate, right? You've made that decision ahead of time. Two, you make that decision that if you do get pregnant, you will not abort the baby because you understand it's a human being, right? Now, then you will not abandon the baby, right? Although the state makes sure you don't abandon them financially, but they don't necessarily emotionally. And you don't abandon the baby too, right? So that's the other thing. But what I think what your point is that you need to prepare yourself mentally ahead of time for the situation that comes, right? And I think that we all need to think about it. And that's what a lot of these series are, right?
A lot of Christians look at this as, well, I won't ever have one.
But
it's not my choice. And I think that's like the biggest thing I hear
from
Christians all the time.
I wouldn't have one, but
I wouldn't have one. But then it goes up to this whole thing of like, okay, well, you may not be the tank driver, But what if you're just a guard at the camp?
Right.
Right? And that, like, well, does that make it okay just because you're a guard at the camp?
Yeah,
Well,
you're not.
actually
Or maybe,
killing the
what is
Jews,
the guard? What if you're
but
just a cook in the camp, right? The cook
Yeah.
for the guards in the camp, right? I mean,
Exactly. I'm
at
just
what
a
point-
guard. I'm not the one actually killing the
Yeah,
Jews.
yeah.
You know, I'm not riding the tractor.
Right.
Well, what's the difference between now you're over there riding the tractor? You're just burying them.
Yeah.
You know? Oh, well, now they want you to drive over live people. You know,
Well,
if you don't make up your mind beforehand, and I guess that's the part that when you have conversations with people and you walk through this stuff, like I always walk through the location is the big one I always go through. Is like, what's the difference if it's here, there, in the birth canal? It's all, I mean, it's just real estate.
Yeah.
You know, like where
it
are
is,
you
yeah.
at? And a lot of people come back to say, well, at the end of the day, it's still not my decision. And it comes back to that. I really love how Ray Comfort goes through that whole scenario.
At some point, yeah. Well, but I think, but also it goes back to the whole deer in the woods thing. Right? What is it that you're killing? If you're killing a human being, then does it bother you that somebody else is killing a human being? Right? So you're still responsible for that. And by the way, the Nuremberg trials were a great example of how it doesn't matter what orders you're given, you're still responsible, right? Because the guard, if you know anything about the Nuremberg trial, the guard said, well, we were just following orders. And the Nuremberg said, no, and this is an ancient thing. No, you are responsible for the actions you take, even if you're ordered to do bad things, right? And there's lots of examples, and we've talked about that in the different sort of ethics issues that we've addressed. Great. Next question. Again, if I know we're late. If you need to leave, please do. I mean, I don't want to stop you.
On the environment, being inside or outside that womb, there's a number of states. They have like the drunk driving accidents. They kill the mom.
Yeah, and
it counts as 2 homicides. But I mean, is that like nationwide or is it just X number of states?
The reason I don't appeal, so let me explain the argument. The argument is in some states, if you kill a pregnant woman, a mother, you are charged with 2 murders. California was like that. Remember what was the Lacey Peterson case, right? And Connor Peterson, right? Killed Connor, the baby, and Lacey, even though he was unborn, right? Scott Peterson was the father, right? But here's the reason I don't use that. It's a good argument in the sense that it shows you where the law is, but it's a legal argument. It's not necessarily a moral argument because the law could change tomorrow. Yeah. There's if you kill a woman and she had a miscarriage, then you were charged with 2. Yeah. So a lot of times I'll see those arguments, but I won't use them because I know that tomorrow the law could change, and then they'll go, oh, see, now I'm justifying it, right? So that's why I stay away from some of those arguments. But it's a great point, right here. Are there any online on the Zoom call? Okay.
Just a quick question about the tax, the burdens on taxpayers, because right now Gavin Newsom wants to fund all these,
yes,
abortions coming over. So do you know what the numbers taxpayer has been paying federally?
I don't know, but I know it's a lot of money. So here's the thing. Remember I said, anytime you see government money, things are bad. So who do you think is the biggest killer of black kids? No. The U.S. government. Through the Planned Parenthood. Because they pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for every abortion that Planned Parenthood or any other abortion clinic does. Right? It's subsidized by the federal government and the state government in many cases. Yeah. So whenever you want to see something evil happen, follow the money. If the government is giving you money, then it's probably going to do something evil. Of course it's our money. It's absolutely our money. Oh, right. Microphone, hang on. Right there. Oh, go ahead and then go ahead.
Do you think there should be more strict punishments for rape?
Absolutely, yeah. I think rape is a horrendous crime. Right? Which brings up the whole argument. Remember, but you see how if somebody is a victim of rape and gets pregnant, you can see how even then you should not have an abortion, right? Because what are you killing? You're still killing a human being. And the argument is actually phrased this way, and that's why I say I want to be very sensitive. I come to this much later, because if you don't grant me that, I still want an exception. By the way, whenever I'm arguing with people about, they're like, well, when does life begin? They'll say, well, when you have brainwaves. I say, fine, will you accept an abortion ban after 6 weeks? No, okay. Well, how about when you have kidneys? Will you accept abortion ban? Like, give me a line. I will start there, right? Even if you say it's 20 weeks, I will start there. But right now, it's all the way till they're born, right? So I will take any line and then I will try to move it back further, right? So in the same way with rape, I'll give you rape for now. Not because I think it's a good idea, but because I want to get somewhere rather than nothing. And it's like let's say I have 100 kids held hostage and the kidnapper and the kidnapper says, I'm going to kill them all. I go, no. Okay, says, okay, fine. I'll release 99, but I'm going to save one. I'll go, yeah, give me the 99. I'm not going to go, no, give me all 100 before I accept anyone, right? I'm going to give me the 99. I'll come back for the one later. Then we'll argue about the one. Once the 99 are safer. So let's get those 99 saved first. But your question was, and with the rape argument too, let's look at this. Let's say that there's a guy who rapes your sister, right? And they catch him. And this is a tough one. If I'm talking the Middle East, this is not going to work. And they've catch him and he's on trial, right? Can you walk up to the guy sitting in the courtroom and blow his brains off? No. Okay? So if you can't kill the guy who committed the rape, why are you killing the innocent victim of the rape, which is the mother or the baby? Right? No, in the Middle East, that doesn't work. Yeah, I'll kill him right away, right? But we think differently. I'm like, okay, here's an argument. Tell me why it makes a difference, right? So that's important. Yeah, but rape, absolutely, yes. Here's the problem with rape, though. The difficulty with rape, because we've seen false rape cases and real rape cases, right? We've seen a number of black men go to prison on false rape charges. So the difficulty there, I believe that, yes, if you catch somebody in the act of raping or if you can prove somebody is a rapist, then definitely the punishment should be worse.
Rape. What do you think the difference is between rape and somebody just saying that?
I don't know. I've not really spent any time with that. That's a
Because I know in
definite
the
issue.
Bible it says that if a woman calls out in distress in a city and no one comes, then that's rape, and he should be beaten to death.
Yeah.
And
So the Bible does have examples. I have not done any research on that, but I think that is an issue that we have to. Yeah, he raped his sister, half sister. Yeah. Yeah. So and he should have been punished. And in fact, David didn't punish him, and so his son, I can't remember his name, went and killed. Pardon? Yeah. Oh, Absalom was it was Absalom's sister. So Absalom went and killed the guy who did the rape. That's right. I forgot. Yeah. Who was the guy that he killed? It started with an A. Anyway, that was the guy who was supposed to be the king after David. It was his firstborn, wasn't it? So, okay. Next question. Back there, yeah.
I guess it was 2 comments. Also adding on to, because we talked about this before, how insidious Planned Parenthood is, that they're in all over the world with your taxpayer money.
Yep.
I mean, I told you about 2020 in Guatemala, where against the Constitution.
Yeah, tell the story, because this is a good story. I mean, a sad story.
So there was somebody found out that Planned Parenthood had set up this ship out on the ocean. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
And they set up an abortion clinic. And so, yeah.
Now, it's illegal in Guatemala, right?
And it's illegal in the Constitution of Guatemala to have an abortion. I don't know, but they paid some government official.
So they're out of the borders. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, obviously they were docked.
Oh, they were docked.
Yeah.
Oh, not in international waters. Okay. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. But anyway, so somebody brought light to it. And then my second question, or I guess comment, was that I had followed this professor watch list, and apparently there's some professor in Princeton that advocates for abortion up to 2 years old.
Oh, yeah, Singer. Yeah,
so I always bring it out that way. I say abortion, and most people go, abortion? You're talking about murder.
Yeah. Well,
So I leave it.
yeah, that's Peter Singer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Funny. We'll do two more questions and then we'll wrap up. Funny story here. I was arguing with someone, and I said postnatal abortion, right? And they laughed at me. Says, "There's no such thing as postnatal." I said, "No, there's not only there's such a thing as a postnatal abortion, but there's actually a movie where they use that phrase. Do you know what that movie is? Terminator. Terminator." This is the first one where the Terminator goes back and tries to kill her before she gets pregnant, right? And then and there's a whole discussion about the postnatal and prenatal abortion, right? Because it's like, well, because he didn't want to do a postnatal abortion, he actually tries to do a prenatal abortion by killing the mother before it. It's like, it's just a very interesting, but okay, keep going. Last two questions, and then we'll move on. We'll close. I think we're done. Are we done? Any more questions? Right here.
What do you think the punishment should be for rape?
Oh gosh, don't get me into that. I think, personally, if it was somebody raped my sister or my daughter, I think death would be a good punishment, personally.
Like in the Old Testament, stoned to death?
Yeah, but this is something that the society actually can decide what the punishments are. Yeah, I talk about that in my book about the judicial law, where society can decide what the punishment is for certain crimes. Yeah. But yeah, my choice. But I would have to be 100% sure that it really was the person. Yeah.
Right. So we've talked about being caring and compassionate towards those who are either pro-choice or already have had abortions. But just to sort of follow the idea of punishment, how should we define punishment for those who actually do those abortions? Because there are consequences.
Okay. Yeah. So
for
what
your actions.
are the punishments for? That again is punishments. Our society should determine that.
Yeah, of course.
I would say that if it's a doctor that's doing the abortion, then I think there should be consequences. She definitely needs a medical license, things like that. And if there are, like the guy who, Gosnell, who had killed babies born alive, I think the death penalty would be actually a good punishment for him. So it really depends. Now, somebody will bring up, well, what about mothers who have an abortion? Mothers go to the doctor to give them an abortion. The doctor's the one who's doing the abortion.
Right, sort of like
and if mothers try abortion on themselves, they usually end up getting suffering the consequences. So
right. Sort of like a man hiring a guy to take a hit.
So I would not go after the mother personally.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. That's all I want to know.
But that's, again, my personal choice. That's something that society would have to determine. Because, last question with Brenna.
I'm so happy to see all these young people here. This is a blessing. Thank you very much, Neil. 3 movies, if you have not seen: Unplanned, Kermit Gosnell, and Matter of Life.
I've not seen Matter of Life.
It's very good. It was the most recent one. Sure. Unplanned, Kermit Gosnell. It's Kermit, Kermit, Gosnell, Gosnell. That was the doctor's name who did all these abortions. And a lot of them were after the baby, like the head was out, and he would put scissors through the back of the neck. But the movie's not gory. It's excellently done. So Kermit Gosnell, Unplanned, and Matter of Life.
Okay, I've not heard of it. So the Unplanned is Abby Johnson's story. She was one of the highest rated abortion clinics. She had the most abortions at a clinic. Then she was like checking all the marks, making them the most amount of money. She was like a star performer in abortions. She basically one day she just realized what she was doing.
Well, the 40 Days for Life group, every year they were there.
Yeah.
And they prayed.
Yeah,
for
they would
40
pray
days.
all the time. Outside.
Yeah, all the time.
And one day
kept
God
loving
just
her
opened
and
up her
witnessing to her.
And so it talks about the inside of the Planned Parenthood clinic. The second one, Kermit Gosnell, he had killed, I don't know how many hundreds of babies, but he had the babies' bodies in a freezer.
Yeah.
And it was when you looked at it, you could see that they were killed many were killed after they were born or after the head was delivered, things like it. It was just total mayhem. And then the last one, I'm not sure. What was that one? The
Matter of Life. It just was within the last few weeks.
Yeah.
It's very, in fact,
I've not seen that. What's it about?
Well, it's about abortion, and it presents both sides, and Scott Klusendorf is in it. It's very well done.
So the other thing is, and I haven't updated my thing. David DeLeiden, if you guys know who it is, he actually did David DeLeiden. He did a sting. Now, very interesting backstory on that one. David DeLeiden used to work with Lila Rose, and one day he said, "Hey, can we talk?" And we went out to lunch right here. And he said, "I'm doing this new thing. I need money for it. Can you help fund it?" And I said, "Yeah, I can probably put about 10,000." He kind of laughed. He says, "I need about $250,000. I said, "Oh." He said, but if I can't, I'll come back to you later, kind of thing. And he gave me his whole plan of what he did. And he said, "Don't share it with anybody." I had to sign an NDA for it and all that. And, but a year later, he found somebody to fund it. I think Ray Comfort helped him, and a bunch of other people helped him. And he's the one that went into 2 different companies, and they found them purchasing body parts from abortion clinics. And they would actually have an order saying, "We need this, that, or the other." And the abortion clinics would delay abortion. So if they needed a 21-week-old baby and a lady came in that had a 19-week-old, they would reschedule her to come in 2 weeks later so they could have a 21-week-old kidney from a baby. And they had a list of prices. And I should put that all up, but it's already long enough. David DeLeiden. And it was, what was his? Yeah, and Kamala Harris. Yeah.
Kamala Harris put him.
By the way, it's Kamala Harris. If you're Indian, it's Kamala. This Kamala nonsense, I don't know where she comes up with it, but it's Kamala. Kamala Harris, she was the one who went after him. For what? Not because they were selling baby parts, but because he had revealed that they were selling baby parts. So rather than going after them, they went after him. And so he's still facing these 9 counts. And
Wow.
it's ridiculous. So, but anyway, what was this institute? I have the paperwork still. Institute for Biomedical Research or something. He had come up with a name. And he basically went into the companies and he had video of everything they were doing. Conversations just like... yeah, and by the way, so David DeLeiden and Lila Rose. David learned from Lila. Lila learned from, what's his name? No, what's his name? The guy who's the Truth Veritas.
James O'Keefe.
Yeah, James O'Keefe. So James O'Keefe, when he was 19, he trained Lila when she was 15.
Really?
Lila's from here.
She is, yeah.
In fact, she used to go to Saratoga Federated, right? So yeah, in fact, our kids used to go to their homeschool group, which is Live Oak, right? Yeah, so it's all right here. She started her live action at the age of 15, and they would go into Planned Parenthood, and she would say, "My 39-year-old boyfriend got me pregnant. How do I get a..." And they were like, "Oh, don't say that he's 39. Put 19 on it, or put 16 on it." And they were training her how to lie. And she revealed those videotapes. And nobody took action against Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood said, "Oh, no, it's just an exception." And this is the way they did it. This is why Veritas Forum is so great. Because they'll release one thing. And then everybody will say, "Oh, no, that's just an exception." Then they'll release another one. And they'll say, no, that's just an exception. And then they'll release 19 more. But if they released them all at the same time, then you wouldn't get the same. You'd get the lies revealed and so that's what she was doing. She'd just release one at a time, but she had the other 20 behind it. So, anyway, last comment.
I understood that Kamala Harris sent people, I call them henchmen, into David DeLeiden's apartment to break in.
Yeah, they broke in and they stole everything. Yeah. I'm hoping he had backups, but I don't know. It's like you can steal anything you want from me. I've got backups in 3 different places. So it's like, that's never going to get us. Yeah. So we need to pray. Yeah. So anyway, thank you guys. Have a great week. See you tomorrow. Curtis Bowers. And if you have any questions, please come out. If you want to talk privately about anything, please come talk to me. I'll be happy to address it. Yeah. Pardon?